Some people think they're entitled to your time, your energy, your peace, like you're some emotional vending machine they can punch whenever they're having a bad day. Boundaries, they treat those like suggestions. But here's the ugly truth. Most people don't even realize how much damage has been done until they're already emotionally exhausted, living in survival mode, and wondering why they feel hollow after every interaction. I remember one client, let's call her June. Sweet, loyal, mid-60s, the kind of woman who brought cookies to neighbors and never said no to a family favor. It wasn't until her own daughter asked to borrow money for the 4th time that month without a single repayment that June finally realized, this isn't love, this is entitlement hiding in a bloodline. That's why in this video I'm revealing 5 specific behaviors that you should never, ever tolerate. From anyone, not your partner, not your boss, not even your family. Because if you keep letting it slide, you're the one who pays the price. If you're ready to stop justifying the disrespect and start protecting your peace, like, comment below, and subscribe, because the emotional armor you're about to build starts right now. Let's dive in. 1. Constant criticism. There's a particular kind of emotional erosion that doesn't show up all at once. It doesn't explode. It seeps. It begins with one offhand comment, maybe about your outfit. Then it's your voice, your ideas, your dreams. Over time, you start shrinking, not because you've changed, but because someone has slowly convinced you that nothing about you is quite right. That constant, persistent criticism isn't just unpleasant. It's psychological warfare. And it is the first behavior that should never be tolerated, no matter who it's coming from. People often confuse criticism with helpfulness, but there's a massive difference between constructive feedback and what we're talking about here. Constructive feedback is specific, collaborative, and rooted in care. It's about improvement. Constant criticism, however, is about domination. It doesn't target what you do. It targets who you are. And for many people, especially older adults who've spent decades internalizing this kind of treatment under the guise of tough love or family dynamics, this pattern can become dangerously normalized. What feels familiar isn't always healthy. Just because someone has always spoken to you that way doesn't mean they ever should have. Psychologically, ongoing criticism activates the brain's threat detection systems. Studies have shown that repeated negative feedback, particularly from people we are emotionally close to, can rewire our brains to anticipate rejection, even when none is present. You start doubting your own ideas before speaking. You feel anxious before sharing anything creative or vulnerable. You lose your natural confidence, not because it was never there, but because someone else has been steadily chiseling away at it. In families, it's often disguised as comparison. Why can't you be more like your brother? In workplaces, it's the supervisor who only notices your flaws, never your achievements. In relationships, it's the partner who makes backhanded remarks under the pretense of honesty. These are not coincidences or personality quirks. These are emotional strategies that, whether intentional or not, leave you feeling smaller than you are. And the longer you allow it, the more damage it causes. From a Stoic perspective, this kind of persistent criticism is the very opposite of what a virtuous life demands. The Stoics valued discipline and resilience, yes, but not silence in the face of abuse. Epictetus taught that while we can't control what others do, we are fully responsible for what we accept and how we respond. To live with dignity means drawing clear lines around what is acceptable and what is not. A person who consistently tries to diminish you is not offering wisdom. They are undermining your soul. So how do you respond when you realize this behavior is present in your life? First, by validating your own experience. The sinking feeling you get around that person is not weakness. It is your internal compass trying to alert you to danger, the tension in your shoulders, the fatigue after speaking to them, the hesitation before you answer their call. Those are not minor annoyances. They are symptoms of repeated emotional violation. Responding doesn't always mean confrontation. For some, especially those in long-term family dynamics, it may mean subtle redirection, clear communication, or gentle distance. For others, it may mean creating strict emotional boundaries, limiting time spent with that person, or even ending the relationship altogether. The most dangerous choice is to keep absorbing the damage because it's easier than naming the truth. You were not born with the belief that you're not enough. Someone taught it to you. And like any false lesson, it can and must be unlearned. No one gets to convince you that your worth is conditional. No one has the right to make you second-guess your value through constant criticism masked as care. The moment you recognize this pattern is the moment you begin to reclaim your space. And with each step back from the noise, you begin to hear yourself again, clearly, honestly, and without apology. That is where your healing begins, and that is where their control ends. 2. Boundary violations. I still remember the moment an elderly client told me about how her son kept letting himself into her home, not calling, not knocking, just entering, using the spare key she gave him in good faith, thinking it would be used only for emergencies. At first, it was small things, dropping off groceries or paperwork, but then he'd show up while she was asleep or sit in the living room waiting for her to finish her bath. When she finally confronted him, explaining how unsettling it felt, he laughed it off, told her she was overreacting, that he was just trying to help. The next week, he did it again. That's when she asked, "Why do I feel guilty for wanting privacy in my own home?" This is what boundary violation looks like, and it's behavior number 2 that no one should ever get away with. When someone repeatedly ignores the limits you clearly set and makes you feel like the problem, it isn't a misunderstanding, it's a power play, and it cuts deep, not just because of the act itself, but because of what it implies. Your comfort, your needs, your autonomy don't matter. Boundaries are not walls, they are guidelines, invisible fences we create to protect the most valuable aspects of ourselves, our time, our space, our emotional bandwidth. For some, it's needing advance notice before guests arrive. For others, it's not discussing religion or politics at dinner. In relationships, it might mean alone time, financial transparency, or needing digital privacy. None of these things are too much to ask. Yet boundary violators, especially those closest to us, often make it feel like they are. Some people cross boundaries because they were never taught to see them. They grew up in environments where emotional access was demanded, not earned, where closeness meant control, not care. And they continue the cycle, believing that if they love you, they should have full access to you, your time, your thoughts, even your physical space. But there's a more dangerous kind of boundary crosser too, the manipulative kind. The ones who know exactly what they're doing. They don't kick the door open, they test it. A little push here, a little nudge there, seeing what they can get away with before you push back. When you finally speak up, they call you dramatic or selfish or cold. They weaponize your empathy and shame you for having standards. The subtle violations are the most sinister because they happen so gradually. The coworker who jokes too often about your personal life, the parent who brings up painful subjects in public, the friend who borrows money and dodges repayment, the partner who accidentally reads your messages while pretending not to snoop. Each instance might seem minor on its own, but each one chips away at your self-respect until you no longer feel entitled to basic boundaries at all. From a Stoic perspective, boundaries are an essential act of self-governance. Epictetus said that no one has power over your inner world unless you give it to them. But the outer world, the time, energy, and space we manage daily, also requires stewardship. And when you allow others to constantly intrude, you not only give them your energy, you begin to lose sight of what's yours to protect. The key isn't aggression, it's clarity. When someone crosses a line, communicate with precision. Not emotion, not explanation. Clarity. Describe the behavior. State how it affects you and define what needs to change. No apologies, no guilt. You are not punishing them, you're preserving yourself. But here's what most people miss. Boundaries without consequences are suggestions, not standards. If someone keeps violating your limits despite clear communication, it's not time for another talk, it's time for action. That may mean limiting time with them, ending a particular kind of conversation, or in some cases, cutting ties entirely. The longer you tolerate repeated violations, the louder you send the message that your lines are flexible and eventually invisible. No one who truly loves you will resent your boundaries. They may stumble at first, but they will adjust. They will ask questions. They will respect the changes. Because real love isn't about access, it's about respect. And anyone who insists that your boundaries are unreasonable is telling you exactly how little they value your autonomy. So ask yourself, how many times have you felt uncomfortable and said nothing? How many moments have you swallowed your truth because keeping the peace seemed easier? That may have been necessary once, but it's no longer acceptable now. Your space is sacred. Your peace is not optional, and your boundaries are not negotiable. Let that be the line no one crosses again. 3. Manipulation and gaslighting. Did you know that long-term victims of gaslighting can lose their ability to distinguish between intuition and anxiety? That's the kind of damage emotional manipulation causes. It doesn't leave bruises. It leaves confusion. It doesn't scream. It whispers until your inner voice stops answering. This is behavior number 3 that no one should ever get away with. Unlike other forms of abuse, manipulation and gaslighting don't announce themselves. They move quietly. They don't barge into your life. They infiltrate. They make themselves look helpful, reasonable, even loving. And that's what makes them so dangerous. While constant criticism attacks your confidence, manipulation erodes your clarity. You're not just unsure how you feel. You're unsure if you're allowed to feel at all. At first, it's subtle. A phrase here, a contradiction there. You're being too sensitive. I never said that. You always twist things. These phrases are carefully chosen. They don't just disagree with you, they erase you. And over time, you start handing over your certainty in exchange for peace. Until eventually, you stop trusting your memory, your decisions, your instincts. That's not conflict. That's psychological displacement. Now pause. How do you feel around them? Do you leave conversations feeling like you've missed something? Are you constantly rehashing arguments in your head, trying to prove to yourself that you weren't imagining things? That's your subconscious trying to piece itself back together after being emotionally pulled apart. The Stoics taught us to seek truth above all. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that perception is not always reality, and that wisdom lies in learning to see things as they are, not as others present them. But gaslighting does the opposite. It warps reality so masterfully that you begin to rely on the abuser's version of events because yours feels unstable. You lose your grip on what is because they've trained you to second-guess it. This is especially painful for older adults, those who've built entire lives on being rational, composed, resilient. Suddenly, someone much younger or emotionally erratic is challenging everything you believe about yourself. Not with fists, but with fragments. That's the weapon, doubt. And when it's used often enough, you start believing you've become fragile. But you haven't. You're being manipulated. So how do you defend yourself? First, stop trying to win the argument. A gaslighter doesn't want resolution. They want control. The more energy you spend trying to explain your side, the more material they have to twist. Instead, step into observation. Start writing things down. Keep a journal of conversations. Make note of contradictions. Gather emotional evidence, not to confront them, but to reconnect with your own reality. Then, test your perceptions. Talk to someone outside the fog, someone who has no reason to lie to you. When they validate your experience, and they will, you'll start to see how far you've been pulled from your truth. Finally, set a consequence, not a threat, a boundary with a door. When the pattern repeats, and it will, step back. You don't need a fight, you need freedom. The scariest part of gaslighting is that you don't realize it's happening until you've already started silencing yourself. But there is a line. There always is. And once you cross it back into self-trust, the fog starts to thin. You begin to remember who you were before every conversation became a negotiation with reality. Emotional manipulation is not a mistake. It's not a communication problem. It is an engineered system of control. And no one who truly loves you would ever want to confuse, diminish, or dismantle the very core of who you are. So trust the discomfort, trace it to the pattern, and when someone repeatedly makes you feel like you've lost your mind, it's time to stop giving them access to it. That's not a weakness, that's wisdom, and it's yours to reclaim. 4. Dishonesty that destroys trust. There's a silence that falls the moment you realize someone has lied to you. Not a misunderstanding, not a small omission, a real lie, intentional, premeditated, and delivered with a straight face. In that moment, something breaks. Not just the trust between you and them, but something within yourself. The feeling that the world made sense 5 minutes ago, and now it doesn't. Chronic dishonesty is the 4th behavior that no one should ever get away with. Not in your relationships, not in your home, and certainly not in your heart. Some lies come dressed in charm, others come laced with justification, but the outcome is always the same. Your emotional foundation begins to erode, and it's not the big, outrageous lies that cause the most damage. It's the slow, consistent drip of deception over time. The white lies, the half-truths, the promises never kept. The convenient forgetfulness, the shifting stories that don't quite match, but just close enough that you question whether it's worth pressing. This kind of dishonesty isn't just inconvenient, it's psychologically destabilizing. Repeated exposure to lies damages your ability to trust not only others, but yourself. You begin to question your intuition, you double-check your memory, you feel foolish for expecting consistency. That internal erosion is the true cost of living with someone who cannot or will not tell the truth. And dishonesty has forms far beyond simple lying. There's omission, what they don't say but know matters. There's minimization, making harmful behavior seem insignificant. There's deflection, changing the subject just as accountability begins. And then there's betrayal, dressed as kindness, saying all the right things while doing all the wrong ones behind closed doors. What's most disturbing is how normalized these patterns have become. We live in a culture that often treats deception as strategy. Protecting someone's feelings, avoiding unnecessary drama, managing expectations. These are just reframes for manipulation. And over time, people who lie habitually become masters at convincing others that it's no big deal, that everyone lies, that you're too rigid, that if you really loved them, you'd stop making everything a problem. But there is a hard truth you must accept. People who lie consistently are telling you something deeper than their words ever could. They're showing you that your peace is secondary to their convenience, that your trust is something they're willing to gamble with, that their comfort is worth more than your clarity. The Stoics were unflinching about truth. For them, honesty wasn't just a virtue, it was a discipline. A person who cannot be truthful cannot be trusted to grow. And a relationship without trust is not intimacy, it's performance. Seneca taught that truth is the first lesson of friendship. That still holds. Without truth, there is no real connection, only the illusion of one. So what do you do when dishonesty becomes a pattern? You stop listening to the apologies and start watching the behavior. Does it change? Does it repeat? Are there moments of genuine accountability or only temporary guilt followed by more of the same? When words and actions don't align, believe the actions. You stop trying to fix them. Their dishonesty is not your project. It is not your burden to carry. The moment you take responsibility for someone else's inability to be honest, you place yourself in a prison of emotional labor they will never repay. You start protecting your clarity, limit your exposure, set clear expectations, and if the lies continue, enforce real consequences. That may look like distance, it may look like separation, it may look like silence, but it must look like something. Because the one thing worse than being lied to is staying where the truth never shows up. You deserve consistency, not perfection, but honesty, not empty reassurances, but real accountability. And when that's not present, it's not your job to make peace with it. It's your job to leave. Because honesty isn't just about morality, it's about mental health. And without it, you don't just lose trust in them. You lose parts of yourself you may never fully get back. Don't let dishonesty steal one more piece of your peace. Not again. Not ever. 5. Disrespect disguised as jokes. It usually starts with a laugh, a casual remark, a little jab in public that makes your cheeks burn. Maybe you force a smile. Maybe you laugh along to keep things smooth. But deep down, something tightens in your chest. You feel exposed, not seen, not understood, but mocked, ridiculed. And when you finally speak up, they throw up their hands and say, "Relax, I was just joking." This is the 5th behavior no one should get away with, disrespect disguised as humor or honesty. And it may be one of the most socially accepted forms of emotional abuse we allow, especially from the people closest to us. I once worked with a woman named Carol, a retired librarian in her 70s. In her words, she had a thick skin, raised during a time when you didn't talk back, and you certainly didn't make a fuss over words. Her brother, who she had always considered the blunt one, would make comments about her weight, her home, her divorce, always with a smirk, always followed by, "You know I'm just being honest," or, "If you can't take a joke, that's on you." For decades, Carol shrugged it off. Until one day, during a holiday dinner, he joked that her ex-husband didn't leave, he escaped. That time, something broke. She didn't speak to him again for 2 years. It wasn't the insult, she told me. It was realizing I'd spent my whole life letting someone sharpen their tongue on my back and calling it love. That's how subtle and corrosive this behavior can be. These aren't harmless jokes. They're precision strikes to your dignity, hidden behind a smokescreen of sarcasm. They mock your dreams, criticize your body, question your choices, all while demanding you laugh along to keep the peace. When you don't, you become the problem. You're too sensitive, too emotional, or can't take a joke. But let's be clear, if the laughter only goes one way, it isn't humor, it's humiliation. And then there's the weaponized version. Brutal honesty. It's not about truth, it's about dominance. "I'm just being real," they say as they tear down your confidence. But true honesty, the kind rooted in care and character, is never brutal. It's deliberate, measured, compassionate. What they're offering isn't clarity, it's control, dressed up in the language of truth. From a Stoic lens, this type of behavior is the antithesis of virtue. Marcus Aurelius taught that words are to be used as a physician uses medicine, to heal, not to harm. The Stoics believed in speaking the truth, yes, but never at the expense of kindness or wisdom. Disguising cruelty as truth is not courage, it's cowardice with a clever vocabulary. So how do you respond? First, stop laughing at what hurts. Stop explaining away what wounds you. When someone crosses a line and tries to wrap it in humor, name it. Say, "That felt disrespectful." Not aggressively, not emotionally, just clearly. Don't argue, don't debate. Let the discomfort sit where it belongs, with them. If the behavior continues, escalate your boundary, not by yelling, but by acting. Step away, withdraw emotionally, and if needed, remove them from your space entirely. Because repeated disrespect, especially the kind that hides behind "I didn't mean it," is no less real just because it's wrapped in a punchline. The people who deserve your time are the ones who care how their words land, not just what they meant. And if that person turns out to be someone close to you, family, friend, partner, remember this: proximity doesn't entitle anyone to degrade you. You do not owe access to someone who uses your insecurities for sport. You're allowed to say, "That's not funny." You're allowed to say, "That's not love." You're allowed to say nothing at all and walk away from people who mistake cruelty for connection, because dignity is not up for debate. Not in your presence. Not anymore. You've just seen 5 behaviors no one, not even family, should ever get away with. Constant criticism, boundary violations, gaslighting, chronic dishonesty, disrespect hidden behind a smile and a "just kidding." These aren't quirks, they're warning signs. And now that you've recognized them, the real question is, what will you do next? Because tolerating toxic behavior doesn't make you strong. It makes you tired. Every time you let someone cross a line without consequence, you teach them, and yourself, that your peace is optional. It's not. So pause and ask yourself, does this relationship energize me or empty me? If it subtracts from your life more than it adds, that's not love. That's damage disguised as loyalty. Start small. Set one firm boundary. Say no without guilt. Call out one joke that isn't funny. Those small acts of self-respect, they're how you begin rebuilding a life that feels safe, strong, and yours. If this video spoke to you, like, comment below, and subscribe, because you're not alone, and your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear tonight. The next video on your screen is your next step toward peace. Click it now. You've already proven you're brave enough to see the truth. Now, let's keep going.